Welcome to Moments, the podcast, where we have conversations that matter. Hi, everyone. My name is Vasia Makris, your host and founder of Moments, a creative agency bridging art, culture, and technology. Joined by my amazing co-host, HardArt, each week we host a live X space, deep diving into hot topics that are shaping the Web3 ecosystem. GM. Thank you everyone for joining and welcome to episode 18 of Moments, the podcast. We're talking all about the Masquerade, the digital art cult, and the future of storytelling. Yes, we're talking about Sam Spratt. Before we kick this off and kind of get into our usual introductions, I'm going to ask everyone to help out and massage Milton likes to put it. I'm going to just ask for people listening if we can just maybe retweet the space, maybe even tag a couple of people you think would be interested in today's discussion. I definitely want to fill the room up, especially as we celebrate the $3 million sale that was just announced, I think, an hour or so ago. I'm very excited to also have Chris Lee on the stage, who we'll be introducing and bringing on in a second. But this is a very, very exciting time. And just listening, Milton, to that song you just introduced us with got me hyped, got me excited. Let's definitely fill up the room and get more people involved in today's conversation. I'm super excited to be opening up the discussion. I think there's so much to talk about. Without kind of delaying any further, I'm just going to jump into the podcast and a bit of an introduction there for those that are maybe new and unfamiliar. Moments, the podcast actually started from Moments, the agency. So I'm founder and CEO of a creative agency rooted in Web3. We're at the intersection of art, culture, and technology. We try to bridge various industries and really create experiences aimed to connect, inspire, and impact those around us. We've had the experience of working with different brands, including Transient Labs, creators like Trevor Jones and Gabe Weiss, and we've even hosted a few different events. So I'm very excited to continue building in 2025 and build the momentum. That said, we introduced our recent podcast division a couple of months ago. I just wanted to quickly touch upon the why I think it's so important to host these conversations with my amazing co-host, Milton. Because at the end of the day, I think it's really about keeping the community at the core here. I want to stay up to date with important Web3 trends. And ultimately, by having my finger on the pulse, I'm able to better serve my clients and other brands that I'm trying to onboard into Web3. So up top, I just have pinned up, in case you're not familiar, we record and stream all of these on all the major streaming platforms. I think it's really important to create an archive of these conversations, especially as they age. I would love to go back and listen to some of these. So we're on all the major streaming platforms. I also pinned up top a tweet that has the information for our newsletter. We send out weekly newsletters as well. Would love some love on those guys. I would super appreciate it as we continue to grow and build out the momentum. And without further ado, I actually wanted to hand the mic to my co-host, HardArt, who's been an amazing friend of mine in Web3 as we navigate this crazy journey. Has also been a great co-host that I have a bunch of fun with. So Milton, I won't delay any further. Why don't you share a little bit about yourself to the audience?
GM, glad to be back. I have been in crypto since 2014, a crypto art collector since 2020. Started that process over on Nifty Gateway, go figure. So good to have Chris Lee from the Nifty Gateway team with us in the building. And I have worked on community building with projects like Trevor Jones's recent collections last year, and meme coin projects like Turbo hosting interviews for people within the Web3 ecosystem, and had speaking opportunities at events like NFC Lisbon and Art Basel this past year. So I'm super lucky to be a co-host with the rockstar builder, producer, and Moments Agency CEO, Vasia. Really happy to partake in this conversation today, where we got a lot to cover, especially after that big news. So super stoked for the convo today.
Same. And let's jump right into it. I'm just going to assume that everyone here knows Sam Spratt. Many of us, I think, were introduced to Sam through his iconic Monument game with Nifty Gateway Studio back in 2023. Since then, we've seen traces of Sam's community kind of surface on the timeline, perhaps after a very large secondary sale, or even posts about his cult-like council meetings. If you've seen the posts, you know what I'm talking about. That said, I think it's also very fair to say that the last few weeks have been Sam just trending on X, dominating our timelines, and I have to give him credit. It's not easy to do that in such an organic way for such a long duration of time. But we're going to get into all of that a little later. Milton, I'm going to hand you the mic again to just give our guest a warm welcome and a proper introduction. I know Chris Lee's here on stage joining us, so I'll let you introduce her.
Hey, yeah, glad to. So, welcome to the stage, Chris Lee, a longtime Nifty Gateway member and an integral component to Sam's first Nifty Gateway collection last year, the much celebrated Monument game. And yeah, first of all, congrats to you, Chris Lee. As we mentioned to you, Sam, Rachel, the team on producing the Masquerade and today's big news with Canvas acquiring the one of one Masquerade piece for a cool $3 million. And Chris Lee, I know you've been such an important part of this process. A recent post about you called you a family member. So you're more than just a team member, you're a family member to them, which says a lot. So glad to have you with us today and glad to get this conversation started. So I know we've got you for a limited time. Maybe we can just start with something simple about your personal take and get some insights on what this project looked like behind the scenes.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me in this space. I'm just honored to be able to chat with you both about this. I think, Sam's really been dominating the timeline, and I feel like I've just been like silently on my computer, like going ham with my team. It's been so insane to see it all unfold. And with the news of the acquisition today, I think like the Nifty Gateway team's just been feeling like more and more re-energized. But behind the scenes, it's definitely madness. It's definitely a lot of work. I think a lot of people see, all of these posts on the timeline, but don't realize really how like thoughtful and intentional and just the amount of time that kind of goes into having a rollout like this. It took over a year in the process.
I'm glad that you pointed that out, Chrisley, because I think, again, a lot of people who, especially if they've never done this type of production, they don't know what it takes to bring something like this to life. And I would love to get more a behind the scenes look from your perspective. Can you briefly actually touch upon Nifty Gateway's involvement in all of this? I mean, you guys obviously helped to bring this all to life. It's absolutely a team effort. Can you kind of clarify a little bit more in terms of Nifty's role?
Yeah, 100%. I think, Milton, it was especially endearing to hear you say that, like, your sort of journey started with Nifty Gateway. I think, like, initially, Nifty Gateway started as this platform that did drops like so often. We used to do drops on the weekends. And slowly, we've sort of turned into a studio and a technical partner for artists. And I think it's been really refreshing because I don't think there's a lot of platforms nowadays that are able to really put a team of developers, a team of designers, and a marketing team to really kind of take an artist's delusions and bridge them into reality. So that's sort of Nifty Gateway's role in all of this. I would call us a technical partner, but also just a studio that backs Sam to bring the Masquerade to life.
Could you also kind of go over maybe your personal involvement in all of this? What was your exact role?
Yeah, for sure. I am Sam's producer. So I was actually introduced to Sam through Yatreda. If you're familiar with that artist, absolutely love Kia. I produced her drop on Nifty called Andromeda of Ethiopia, and she's a good friend of Sam's. So that's when he sort of pitched me the project for the Monument game, and I just remember meeting Sam and thinking like, this guy's absolutely crazy. Like this this is such a complicated concept. But it was really nice because I feel like there's not a lot of artists that are pushing the boundaries of what a digital experience can look like, and Sam's doing it. He's pushing all the boundaries. So my role as the producer is really to oversee every part of the project. It's taking Sam's idea and understanding how we execute that from end to end. So starting with just the initial idea, honing in on that idea, and then taking that to our designers, iterating on that a ton with Sam, making sure it looks the way he wants it to look like, and then working with our front end and back end engineers and creating the wonderful like UX that you've seen on your timeline. The invitation process, as you probably are familiar with, was definitely a feat of creating this sort of like partyful site that has the mass incorporated into it. It was a lot of fun to work on, but yeah, definitely a challenge.
I love that you called it a digital experience, by the way. I love that term. I think this is a great way to describe what Sam is building out. Can you kind of break down a little bit more, like when he came to you, because this is a point that we wanted to mention a little bit later in the conversation too. Like he didn't just build this whole world, overnight. It's obviously taking a lot of time, a lot of ideation, and like you just kind of mentioned, talking to different teams and working with different people to kind of get to this point. Can you kind of give us an inside look? Like, what did that behind the scenes look like? What did those conversations look like? Was the initial one like, I know you guys did the Monument game, but he returned for this one. What did that kind of return conversation initially look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting because if you look at Sam's ecosystem, he has been incredibly thoughtful about any work that he puts out. And it's sort of been this growing ecosystem, starting with his one of ones, and then the Skulls of Lucy, and then the players, and now the 613 masks. So I think every step of Sam's process has been thought through very carefully. And so when he brought the idea of the Masquerade to me, it was a ton of meetings, a lot of questions of me just asking, like, why do you want to do this? Or why does this connect to this? Or, why is the format going to look like this? And it's not coming from a place of me trying to trying to undermine Sam. It's more like I want to get to the root of what Sam's goals are as an artist. And as his producer, I want to make sure that every single person on my team understands, like, hey, this is Sam's overarching goal with this project. And that's going to influence every little detail that you see as a user. So whether it's a button, whether it's the design, or, a game mechanic, I just want to make sure all of that matches to Sam's larger sort of thesis. So a lot of those initial conversations start with just understanding Sam's goals.
Yeah, that's definitely the approach I like to always take in those types of conversations as well. And also kind of just getting in their head, like really, really understanding the more kind of questions and layers you kind of peel away. I think it's difficult to communicate the larger vision, especially when there's so much complexity to it. So I think it's important to not only ask those questions, but if you're receiving them too, I think it pushes you to dive a little bit deeper in terms of how you want things structured as well. So it sounds like, again, a great team dynamic. Go ahead, Grizzly, if you wanted to add on.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, yeah, it's definitely it's tough to do because number one, I have to understand it, but then to onboard the other people on my team, like the lawyers and the tax people, I just think about all of the storytelling I have to do of trying to get them to understand, like, hey, Sam's got this cult, like he's got this cult of really influential people in Web3, and they wear these masks, and then I have to show the picture of Benny on the table, and it's just all so confusing. And so it takes a lot of I think storytelling and pitching from on my end to get everyone on board with okay, this is the lingo, this is a mask, this is what a player is. But it is a lot of fun trying to get people indoctrinated and in the Lucy lore.
Chrisley, I wanted to jump in there just because we've had some funny conversations with artists in the past who are really aspirational. You talked about having the conversations with the attorneys and people on the back end trying to translate this to to the real world people sometimes. But I'm curious the back and forth because I thought it was cool how candid Sam was, and he talked about when he first called you this word salad that came out, about his ideas. And I'm just curious, as a producer, what the back and forth looked like. Is there any times that you had to tell Sam, no, for example, we actually can't do that? Like how much back and forth? I know he's got the creative vision, but I know that you're a part of that conversation, what you can and can't build. So how much back and forth there is there with you?
Oh yeah, no, I say no all the time. That's my main job, I would say. It's I create Sam's vision, but I'm also the person who's like, no, we can't do that. So the initial conversations, it's a lot of back and forth of me looking at the actual idea on paper and saying hey, this is not feasible on our end. And he came to me with some pretty crazy concepts initially, and I just remember there were a lot of sessions. I meet with him weekly, and I create these presentations where I'm just like, maybe we should go this direction, or maybe it makes sense to simplify, the drop in this direction. And I sort of like state my case, but it doesn't just come from me either. It's a team of producers. It's a team of, designers that also help shape the idea. I don't want to take all the credit. It's really collective minds at Nifty that are helping to just massage the initial vision and turn it into something that is amazing, but also achievable.
Yeah, it's again that good balance of like realistically on the operational end, what's possible, and of course keeping in mind the creative vision and the best ways to push those boundaries while marketing and communicating is extremely important as well. Chrisley, tell us, I'm very curious, out of everything that Sam is building here, what has impressed you the most about it?
I would say it's Sam's sort of digital storytelling that is just on another level. Like hearing you even just play the music in the beginning, like it gets you so hype. And the music alone is something that I know Sam has invested a lot of time in, like working with Logic, and like he does these sound recordings in his studio where he's like yelling into the mic. It's just every little detail when it comes to the storytelling of not just Lucy, but why everything is designed in this way. I think that's what the most impressive thing is about this entire production. It's really not just collecting art. It's a digital experience that you have to engage with and question and compete around. I think it's really just pushing digital storytelling to a new level.
1,000%. We're gonna deep dive into that a little bit later in the space, but that to me is one of the most like it's the most impactful things that he's building here and really showing us what's possible. I wanted to very quickly ask you about the music. I don't know if you were able to answer, but the heartbeat at the end, that's not me reading into it, right? That was like a sonogram. Like, is that him making a personal announcement or?
Oh no, no, yeah, you're right on the money. That is actually the heartbeat of his daughter Sila. Um, and if you see at the end, I think you see like this painting of her ultrasound. It's super thoughtful, and I think like that was sort of the initial inception for everything in the Masquerade. And I know it touches like everything in that painting, which is just it's so cute. It's so heartwarming. And I think the on the music, the same note of the music, like it definitely sounds like a lullaby in the beginning, and then it sort of just turns into this like animalistic jungle beats. And I think all of that just goes back to his daughter Sila, which I think is really beautiful.
I definitely agree. Milton, I see hands up. You can go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, and Vasia is so good about writing us an excellent script for this, but this one's a little unscripted. So I just coming off the cuff, I'm just thinking about what Nifty Gateway has produced, and you already hinted at this, Chrisley. You talked about the sheer volume of collection drops. I feel like we called them drops back then too, and now it's more of collections. I think we're maturing even in our vernacular, but. I'm just curious because I'm thinking of maybe one of the last collections that you had on Nifty Gateway, and how they've really started to evolve around community and participation, and they're much longer than 1 day performances. So there's a huge buildup. So coming to mind, for example, and there's some similar characters here too, because Benny was involved in this, but Dave Krugman's Drive. He had a real life event where Benny was auctioning off cars in real life in Texas in Marfa. The participation factor comes in there a lot like Sam, where if you want to participate in these trophy competitions, you can do so on the timeline with Dave. There was even competitions where he was wheat pasting movie-like posters in New York City, and if you could go find them and take pictures with them, there were prizes to be won. But it kind of harks back to what Sam's doing, and that's this participation. It's not a 1 day event. It's a long, drawn out, huge coordinated event of multiple performances, multiple marketing efforts, design, music. Is this something you think is going to need to take place for artists to make a splash to survive? Because we've seen quite a war of an attrition in Web3. Or is this just something that Nifty Gateway in particular is focusing on? You think there's still plenty of other models that are going to survive for artists?
Oh, that's actually a great question. I think there's plenty of other models that artists can, be successful at. You know, you can always be a popular artist and have an open edition and do really well. But I think Nifty has sort of taken our stance on what type of, content we want to put out. And for us, just to give you insight on like how our own vernacular is changing, like we call all of these, what we used to say drops is like productions now. And when you speak about Dave, like, and all of these kind of activations after the drop, Nifty really focuses on what we call like the post-production experience. So we used to do a lot of drops, and then you never really think about like the NFT release after that. You never really revisit the page. And so what Nifty's trying to do is have basically extend the influence of the IP to even after the release in a lot of different formats. So like with Dave, we had the website, but then there's all of these, side ways that you can get involved in the drop, where he had these posters around New York City, and he did, what he did with Benny and Marfa. And we're doing the same thing with Sam. Like, we don't want you to just have this NFT sale and then forget about it. Like, we want you to be fully immersed in the storytelling, and that doesn't stop with the sale. And really with the Masquerade, it really just begins with the sale.
And I think that's just what creates like the sustainability and longevity that we weren't seeing before. It's like we're not taking that one and done approach. And I think it goes back to that word maturing that Milton used. I mean, we as an industry needed to pivot, and it's really, I think it's so fitting, that word productions, for what you guys are doing, because it takes a lot of time. Like regular events and productions is a similar, concept where you're putting in all this time and then being able to follow up and make sure that there's that continued experience for collectors. I think it just creates more emotional attachment as well, which to me is crucial in terms of having a successful collector base and community. Like the more you're able to tap into that emotional base, the stronger I think it's going to perform. Chrisley, do you feel like, I know this is more, again, Nifty Gateway's approach with the productions, but do you think that any artist is in a position to do something like this? Or is it more an artist that perhaps is already established and has certain resources that would be more successful or in a better position or timing in their career to approach it this way?
I mean, I think with Nifty Gateway, like we tend to work with artists who are already a little bit more established in their career, but that's not to say that up and coming artists can't do what we're doing. It requires like a huge team. So if one artist can do all of the marketing and do like front end developing, like that's definitely a possibility, but it's just so much harder. Like I think the awesome thing with Nifty Gateway is that the artist is just able to focus on the art. Like Dave can just focus on the photography of the cars and how the creative direction, and Sam can just focus on, what he's doing and his storytelling, and then Nifty Gateway takes care of the rest. But that's definitely not to say that other artists can't do something like this.
Yeah, it's something Milton and I have said previously. It takes for sure a village to be able to really do certain things, and that luxury of the artist just being an artist, because that's a full-time job on its own, let alone everything else. And it's great to see Nifty coming up on the timeline again. Obviously, it takes a very long time to build out these projects and productions. So seeing you guys kind of reappear and seeing this launch and the massive success of it, just again, major congratulations to the team. And Nifty, like Milton mentioned, was his first entry. I think it was for many people their first kind of introduction to the industry. And you guys have always had that impact. And I'm very excited to now see the pivot and to see continuously how impactful you guys are going to be as a platform and as a team. So just once again, congratulations on the success of all of this. I did want to ask you one more thing. In one word, how would you kind of describe what Sam is building here? What do you think is a good summary of it all?
I would say in one word, definitely unprecedented. Sam, just his mind is so complex and beautiful. And what he's doing with the Masquerade is definitely just pushing the narrative for digital art and like what that can look like. And I'm just so excited for everyone to experience it and to see, what he's been cooking up.
Same, very excited to see the direction it's going to take. And honestly, this is like an ongoing, he's going to continue to grow it. So this is, I still feel like the very early stages of the entire journey he's about to take us on. He's absolutely building a whole world, and it's very exciting to see him take this kind of approach. Very refreshing. It's obviously very difficult to do, but he's doing it in such a high execution. Milton, go ahead. I see your hands up.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in, and I know you probably can't drop too much alpha, Chrisley, but last year we saw in the Monument game that players obviously had to contribute. That was a huge part of the collection, that you're not just buying in, that you actually have to put yourself out there. And that took the form of observations where people were being candid and writing about themselves and their lives. And that was a competition for three winners. Can you hint at anything as far as contributions that the players this go around in the Masquerade are going to have to make?
Yeah, you can actually take a look if you go on the Nifty Gateway site and go to the Masquerade page. You can look at our timeline, but I would say on that question, um, on on stage 4, the party, it will involve creation, it will involve destruction, and it will involve balance. And I think that's all I'm allowed to say.
So mysterious. Yeah, I don't know if that meant anything to you, Milton, but I didn't mean to cut you off, Milton. I don't know if you had anything to respond back.
No, that's great. I know you've got to keep your cards close to your chest, Chrisley. And apparently, this story revolves around an ancient history that's got some players like the gambler, the addict. There's some four players. I know creation and destruction's part of that. So, building the lore slowly but surely, I can appreciate that. But yeah, I would encourage, if you haven't done so, like Chrisley mentioned, take a look at the website, because talking about being a producer, they've produced a great website. It's a landing page that's got all the information, including the long history of this project, starting with the 101s. And this would be really an Act 6 at this point, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot you can go back and read through the timeline and some of the big players that have been involved, including the Council of Lucy, all the way up to last year's collection. And of course, you've seen most of the people involved in this one. But real quickly, I would mention too, if you're in the crowd, you can still get involved, because not quite everybody, you guys had a massive participation rate, Chrisley, and congrats. That's no easy feat either, especially when a lot of people are taking sometimes permanent vacations from the space. But most everybody came back to claim their masks. And that being said, I think there's still a few ways that people can get involved, because there's going to be a public drawing, I believe, starting on the 18th. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So depending on how many guests actually go through with purchasing their masks this week, actually their deadline's today, that'll influence how many masks are available for the public sale, which, as you said, starts on the 18th at 12 p.m.
Awesome. I know y'all did. Yeah, I know y'all did great work. Sorry, Vasia, I see you're on mute on, at least on X. I saw you talking on video, but I'll just chime in real quick. No, I just wanted to just say congrats once again. I know you and Rachel and the whole team have done a hell of a job reaching out to everybody that was previously involved to get them involved in this next chapter. And it looks like the vast majority, I think there was only like 3% with no response. And that's just a huge, huge turnout for another big project like this. So just kudos to you and the team. Congrats once again.
Thank you. Yeah, it was definitely a tough feat chasing all those players down. Trust me. But just the fact that they had to custody, their NFT back on Nifty Gateway and like return was one thing, and then to also make sure they claimed their mask was another. But I feel like everyone woke up and got the memo. I think there was only like maybe 7 to 10 that didn't, but we did a lot in terms of activation there.
Chris, this is also very unique because it runs for a very long time. I was looking at the actual timeline on the site, and this is going till March. When I first initially saw that, I was, I guess, not, what's the word I'm looking for? Honestly, I was shocked in the sense of like, that's not easy of an undertaking, because most people hype a drop a week before. I know you're calling these productions now, and it is a much larger, obviously it's not a one and done thing, but to keep the engagement going for that long of a timeline isn't an easy task. That's pretty much what I'm trying to say. And so far, I mean, it's been happening. It's been very strong. It's been very organic, which I think is extremely important. But can you tell us a little bit more about maybe the strategy in terms of how do you guys keep planning to to maintain this momentum for a few months?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sam's idea is just so big. There was just no way to contain it to one day or even 1 week. As you saw in the timeline, it runs until March. And I think the other insane thing that we're doing is like we are locking the assets until the masquerade is actually over. So if you're participating in the masquerade, like we really sort of demand that you are locked in, literally locked in and engaged with this production. It's not something that you can just sort of mint and then dump. It's truly an experience that we want participants to immerse themselves in, and it'll be fun to process. But yeah, it's definitely a lot longer than your average NFT drop.
Which is one of the things that we love about it. And one of the key, I guess, topics of this space we wanted to talk about was community building. And obviously, this type of redefining the role of collectors, I think is super crucial in making Sam stand out and taking them from just, collecting and one and done and just minting it and limiting their participation. And now he's rewarding people based off of their participation. He's incentivizing them and he's teaching them which behaviors in a way like he admires. And this kind of goes back to the whole, we threw out the word cult before. I mean, he's in a way playing God and giving off this type of energy. But I love seeing the fact that, it went from the council members kind of controlling and dictating the direction to now opening it up to more individuals that are getting involved and seeing how their involvement is going to then be rewarded by the different types of masks, right? Chrisley has different tiers of the masks that he's going to be giving out, basically.
Yeah, and to build on that point, I think like one thing that really impresses me about what Sam is building is that the focus is community as part of the art, which I think is something that not many, artists do. The way that this is all structured, it means that collectors really play an active role in shaping the experience and making it a true sort of dialogue between Sam and his audience. And I think it's something that you just don't really see often. Like you can absorb other artworks by just like seeing it on your timeline, but with the masquerade, it sort of just demands your engagement.
Well, I also feel like this is one of those crucial elements that leads to long-term success. The more that you're able to keep people engaged, to keep collectors in this almost like gamified design of his, it just leads to people getting emotionally attached. It leads them getting emotionally invested. I think this is what creates that kind of cult-like community because people care and it goes beyond just the artwork. And so I think it just leads to something more sustainable and what people are invested in. And I think we're tired of hearing about the floor prices or, kind of comparing it to PFP communities. People were just minting it and holding it and, hoping to get profits. And okay, there's a level of that kind of community and cult, quote unquote, dimensions to it. But when you're actively incentivized to participate and to contribute and then to like bring other people in as well, I think it just kind of magnifies what he's doing and again just like that longer term success. Milton, I know you also had mentioned a couple of other people that had that sort of cult like mentality to help them elevate what they were. I think you had mentioned Basilius and his crypto cult and all these other components. I don't know if you want to touch on that real quick.
Yeah, I think maybe cult gets a bad connotation, but in reality, I think some of those behaviors should be encouraged. So yeah, Basileus has the cult of crypto art. For example, if there's any degens in the room, there's a guy named Murad who talks about all the meme coin projects. Find ones that are like cults. I think at the end of the day, what the positive connotation of a cult is somebody that's dedicated, that has faith in someone to the end of the world. And I think if you look around at Sam's collectors, it's really funny. I find this dynamic interesting where Sam obviously takes over the whole timeline. If you're in 24 hours of art, Telegram, that's all everybody's talking right now is about the sale. For the next few weeks, because this is a months-long production, he's going to be everywhere all the time. And then he'll almost go into hiding. And there will be months on end where you don't hear a lot. And that's okay. Sometimes that absolutely kills momentum. But outside of a secondary sale of a Skull of Lucy, you won't hear too much. But everybody knows that Sam is working behind the scenes. and his team. And they know that he's building a bigger and better team each year and trying to surpass the last production. So people are basically blindly following Sam and the community that he's building, and that's positive cult-like behavior, right? And so far, Sam has not disappointed on that. So I think people are going to continue to follow him as long as he delivers.
I definitely think cult is a good thing as well. I say it in a very positive way. I think it doesn't matter if you're an artist or a musician, an athlete, an actor, even like influencers, like anyone that's building a type of community around them. You want these super fans, the group that Milton's talking about, that they're going to follow you through hell, through high water. And it really, I think what Sam did was really cultivate a quality over quantity. And at first, when I kind of came across what he was building with the Monument game and kind of getting a taste of it initially, I did get the cultish vibe, and I didn't immediately resonate with it, to be honest with you. But I was listening to a recent space that Sam was on, and he talked about exclusivity. And he mentioned he didn't drop an open edition when he obviously had opportunities to do so. He intentionally wanted to build slow and make sure that he was best prepared to manage his community. And I thought that was really interesting. And in terms of exclusivity, because he's releasing things at a slower pace or not so often, he's doing it intentionally because he wants to really have a control in how things are rolled out and being able to really nurture the community in a way that I think is really important. So yeah, I think it was just a little eye-opening for me hearing it from that perspective. Milton, I know you have your hand up, but Chrisley does have to jump soon. So I just wanted to thank her for joining the space. And Chrisley, if there's anything last minute you want to mention about this, the drop or your participation in it, anything else that you wanted to maybe close us out
Sure.
with?
Yeah, I just want to thank you guys again for allowing me to, have this space and talk about my role. I don't really talk about it often, so it was really nice having people who are interested in hearing about what the team does. And yeah, if you're interested in the Masquerade, follow Sam, follow Nifty Gateway, and the public drawing will begin on the 18th. So thank you guys for having me.
It takes a village, girl. We all see you and very grateful for your contributions. It's again great just seeing this come to life. And I love that Sam specifically shouts everyone out and he gives credit where credit is due. So it's very beautiful to see the team effort. Thanks again for joining us. Milton, we can kind of continue the conversation, the two of us. I also want to invite our guests. I don't know, is it NFT Paris? Like, did everyone just ditch us for Paris? Is this why? I know not many people could make it because of the IRL event, but I do want to just mention if anyone wants to join the conversation and join the space, we always keep these as an open discussion. So feel free to join us. Otherwise, Milton, it's just me and you talking about cults. And no, but in all seriousness, there was a couple of main points I wanted to touch upon as we continue the conversation. And I think at this point knows about Sam Spratt. Everyone has seen the tweets go out, and Nifty Gateway has done an incredible job producing the actual drop page. I really love the information and the video. If you haven't seen the trailer, I actually pinned it up top. It's extremely well done. I had to watch it a bunch of times just to get to the core components of what the message is putting out. But I did want to let's bring Chaz on stage. But I did want to talk about three main components that I think are really impactful with what he's doing, which includes the community building, the marketing, and the gamification of what Sam has done. But Chaz, thanks for being brave and joining us. GM, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you? And it's
I'm
a really
doing
interesting
well.
conversation because, like, I've been watching what Sam has been doing for a long time now, since the beginning. Like, and at first I was like, "What kind of cult he has?" You know what I mean? Like, at the same, like, I was like, "Do I vibe with this?" I love the art. Like, I love and I love the consistency of the art. Like, that's one of the things that, like, we're having a conversation online, on here on X the other day with one of my threads where, like, one of my actual collectors, like, doesn't like one of my series that he has that I have out right now, and he was like, it's lacking dot 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 aesthetic, and I was like, what the hell are you talking about, dude? And, like, we got in this whole, like, conversation, this whole argument about, like, there's something to be said about, like, consistency though, and sticking with, like, a certain theme or aesthetic or, like, or style through and throughout, and, like, dropping pieces of, like, in small doses, like, at a time, and, like, building off that one that one look and that one consistent look with like one platform instead of going out. Because like I personally, like outside of like this time I'm doing this series, like if you look up any other platform that I mint on, I'm all over the map. I'm like everywhere. Like I have 16 different styles on every platform that I mint on. And for once I thought, I've been consistent with like creating, but what's going to happen if I just stick with consistency on one platform and just do one at a time? You know what I mean? And that's one of the things that like I watched the way that Sam has done that, and that was one of the people that has inspired me to try something new and like kind of spread my creative wings, decide to see what happens over time and see what I can build behind that. So that's
I
my thought of it.
No, I love that you just mentioned that. I think it's a very, very true. It's something I always say as well when working with artists. You want to be brandable, not to make it commercial and old businessy, but you do. You want people to be able to see your work and to immediately recognize it and say, even if they don't even know the name at first, they're like, "Oh, I remember that artist." And then it kind of that repetition is how you build out a brand. And it sucks in the sense of like, oh, you're quote unquote like limiting your creativity perhaps or not being able to fully express yourself. But I think especially in the very beginning, as you're building a career as an artist, it's important to be recognizable. And people like Wisby, for example, with his little gummy bears, like the first thing comes to mind, you see it, everyone knows Wisby. And then you can take that and really build it out in different directions. But to build upon what you just mentioned, I think what Sam is doing goes even further. It goes even beyond that because he's not releasing a collection and there's a theme to it and then he has another kind of collection. He's building an entire world, which is a very difficult task and it's a huge undertaking, but he's taking us on this journey where we're becoming emotionally invested. We want to know more. We're recognizing characters. We're seeing collectors being embedded into this story. I mean, I don't know if anyone caught it, but it looked like a little Redbeard Easter egg in the latest artwork. So it's seeing this type of evolution in terms of where we can take the art and what kind of storytelling can be done through the art. And it's so crazy because obviously Sam's work is beautiful. The artwork is so intense, and there's you could zoom in and look at it in so many different ways, and the stories you can kind of create around it. But when I first saw the collection and started digging into the Masquerade, I didn't even look at any of the artwork. I was literally just looking at the mechanics and how it was being released and the different components. Like there's so many intricate components on that front, let alone the actual art itself. So yeah, I'm with you. I think it was very interesting, and him being consistent with how he rolls out his actual story regarding the art, I think was very impactful. Milton, I don't know if you have any comments or you want to add on to that at all.
Yeah. Before Chrisley left, I was just going to kind of touch on the cult behavior. It's funny that that's the first thing that Chaz mentioned because I think everybody looking from the outside has that same feeling like this is a cult and they don't know. I think first initially you're like, that's a bad thing. But then when you look at it, you do change your mind a bit. And it's because we've had these crazy cults in the past. And I think when you look at the crazy cults, especially the ones where there were mass suicides and all these outlandish ones that actually caused harm and violence to people, there was typically one cult of personality, wild person at the top, right? And yeah, sure, Sam is at the head of this, but if you see what he did from the beginning with his first one of one, this was unannounced. He brought in bidders. So people who bid on his work, 50 of those individuals who had no expectations except for participating in that first auction, trying to help him get off the ground, lift that first one-on-one price. All of a sudden they got airdropped a Skull of Lucy. So that began the delegation process where it wasn't this godlike complex where, yeah, Sam's certainly the creative vision behind these projects that he's building and these worlds that he's building, but he's starting to delegate that almost from day one through the Skulls of Lucy, that council of 50 members. And then if you recall, last year there was an invitation process from existing members for the players. Now we see that same mechanism taking place to where 256 players last year. Now we've got 613. And people within his circle, he's delegating, essentially trusting them that they're also going to curate good individuals within this circle. He started that process of delegating it out to the community. So I find that to be a positive aspect. When you think of cults, sometimes it's just one egomaniacal wild man or woman at the top. And that's not quite the case here. It's really been more of this grassroots community effort.
Yeah, and I love how very much organic it is. And I mean, to touch on the marketing kind of component, marketing meaning like how has Sam and the team promoted this collection? And aside from obviously him posting on Twitter and Nifty Gateway doing their usual marketing support, the drop page, email blasts, etc., what else is it that they're doing different that's making this such success? And it honestly comes right back to the community. Sam shifted that like collector artist relationship, like you're describing, Milton, and his essentially making these collectors his marketers in a way, and it's impacting his entire brand in general. So what I mean by this is collectors are actively and organically participating, they're advocating, they're posting on him. I mean, how many of these invitations, like in the beginning I didn't even know what this masquerade was, and I'm seeing all these people, oh, I got a +1 for the masquerade, and it's like people are posting, he's not asking them to, they're organically doing it. And I think this is what is so crucial, regarding like the new take, his the boundaries that he's pushing regarding the marketing component of this. And it's similar to a small business. Like when you're a small business, word of mouth is the most powerful tool. And people don't want to be quote unquote sold by the person creating the product. They want recommendations. They want recommendations from people who are actually using that product. And it's so powerful in the real world. Seeing that tactic being trickled into what he's doing here is, I think, what's setting him apart. And we mentioned earlier that this Masquerade technically started in January and it ends in March. So those are a few months of momentum that he's going to continue to build, I think, through this type of organic marketing. CD Cherry, thank you for joining the stage. I believe you're new. Thank you so much for joining in and tuning in. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
So I kind of wanted to say like what you were saying about word of mouth. So literally, I think 2 days ago, I was at Walmart and I was just like talking to people, and literally I was like, "Oh, if you ever need a photographer, I'm one." And I was just, like I'm still like reordering my business cards, so I just like gave them my Instagram and phone number. And you never really know because people are always planning things like just like, not saying I'm not a normal person, but just saying people, they have birthday parties or events or someone's wedding or a corporate event. You never really know who you're gonna meet like in the store. Um, so that's kind of why I kind of like, word of mouth. And I also met like 2 girls. I was like, "Oh, we're always looking for, like, friends. Do you wanna be friends?" I was like, "That's the sweetest thing I've ever heard." I've never, like, had someone just come up to me and was like, "Oh, do you wanna be, like, friends?" I was like, "That's so cool." So, you really never know who you're gonna meet. It's all about, like, word of mouth, what you were saying. So, that's all I wanted to input on that so far. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. Word of mouth goes very far. And at the end of the day, anything that's organic, I'm always going to vouch for it. Like, you don't want the paid marketing kind of approach or just pushing ads to people. Like, people feel it when it's inorganic or it's being forced. And I think it's just people gravitate closer to the things that, again, are just natural. And I think that's what makes Sam's kind of marketing technique, quote unquote, so powerful in this sense. And I'm very curious to see how it's going to continue maturing as we approach, because March is, we have another month plus. What is this, February? Yeah, we have another month of this basically. So I'm very curious how it's going to continue to maintain this kind of momentum.
You could maybe, like, put an AI technicality or something in there to kinda promote it in an organic way, Not all AI is, scary and bad. I kind of felt like that when I first learned about AI, and now I know it's kinda like a tool. So you use, like, ChatGPT if you have a question about something or, idea you kinda wanna use and, stuff like that.
I think that's a good point, CD. So we just talked to Chris Lee, who was a team member, and not every artist is going to have access to a big team and a production outfit like Nifty Gateway, for example. So using the tools that you have at your disposal, some of those are free. I used ChatGPT in the early days of it being released to help actually develop a lot of my interview questions for people within the Web3 art ecosystem. So yeah, you're absolutely right. But I think as
Chat
you
Atomic is good too. It's a new
okay.
one I've been using. Mhm.
Yeah, DeepSeek, I see everybody's using right now as well. So I got to jump out my comfort zone for sure. But yeah, I think, eventually people are looking to have advocates, as Vasi was mentioning, And eventually you get to a point, if you produce good work and a great community, you're going to have that free marketing squad, which is your collector base. And I would agree. I think Sam has done an excellent job transforming the artist collector relationship into his unpaid marketing department. He's not the only one that's done it, but some of the biggest in our names in our space in Web3 have really utilized the network effect from the collectors to help spread the message far and wide. So you're definitely seeing that take place right now around Sam's collection. But yeah, appreciate you joining the conversation, CD Cherry. I do see that Muju's joined the stage as well. So I don't know if Muju wanted to chime in, but we are welcoming any and all speakers to come on stage, as it appears a lot of people are in transit to NFT Paris today. So thank you, Muju, for joining
Milton, can
too.
I
But
just jump in? Do you
yeah,
mind
go
if I
ahead.
just very
Go ahead.
quickly, just to add on what you were saying? Wow, totally lost my train of thought. CD, go ahead. I know you were about to say something.
Oh, I was gonna say actually one of my photos is gonna be in NFT Paris. It's like my first NFT Paris one this year. I kind of like read a poem in a space, and then like all the kind of like people that were in charge of NFT Paris was like, "We're gonna find a way to put your photo in NFT Paris," and I was like, "Oh, that's still like sweet," because the reason why I'm kind of like an artist is like my grandmother, she was like a painter when I was really young, and she like died of like breast cancer, and that's kind of like a lot of times why I go really hard for like my art, like my photography and poetry, and I read it a lot, and I just talk a lot, and I have ADHD, so all these kind of things are like factors of, why I do what I do. And a lot of the time like my family doesn't understand. They're just like, you could do anything else that's more stable. I'm like, no, I don't care if I'm 90 years old. I will still be an artist. I will still be taking pictures. I will still be writing books. It gives you more freedom to do things that you want to do. I don't want to be stuck in an office and have to go to the office every day and clock in. And when my boss says, "Oh, you got to clock out at this time," I couldn't do that. I would have to like my brain is just not functioning that way. The freedom that art gives, it makes you travel around the world. You could go to a gallery and sell your art. You could go take a picture of someone and be an artist. And I feel like that's why, art is that important to me. That's all I really wanted to say.
No, you're preaching to the choir. I feel like once you break out of that matrix, it's like screaming, I don't want to go back. I'm with you. I left my job as a full-time educator and teacher a few years ago, and I've been full-time in the art space. And one of the things you just mentioned regarding your artwork as well, and thank you for sharing, is that emotional connection and the emotion that you put in. And actually, Milton, that was what I wanted to respond back to what you were saying. You mentioned collectors being this like free marketing tool, which I agree very organically is that. But more importantly, the reason as to why collectors are doing that is, I think, very important to point out. We're used to these, PFP kind of communities, CryptoPunks, whatever, and people feeling like that, they are in a community and it can get a little culty and all that, but they're primarily driven, I feel like, because of the monetary value in which they hold. They're trying to pump their own bags in a way. They're trying to keep the floor price high. They're trying to make sure that the entire community wins in a financial point of view. But I don't think that's necessarily the driving factor in Sam's case. I think people are really emotionally connected to this type of community. And in my personal experience and opinion, that can go way further than the financial component. I think people will do things they normally wouldn't do if they're motivated from like from a place of purpose, from a place of fulfillment or contribution, and feeling genuinely part of that community from an emotional standpoint and not from that kind of financial lens. So it's just something, again, I wanted to point out regarding Sam's execution and why he's been so intentional in organically expanding his ecosystem. CD, I see a hand up, so feel free if you want to jump into that.
I wanted to say, so I have this kind of like technique, and I've used it since I started in like 2021. Um, for like collectors, if you just kind of get to know them on like a personal level and just they see you in spaces, they know like, oh, she's always like around. I don't really know what she does, but she's just around. Eventually, you're gonna be like, who is this person? She's always here. Let me, DM her. Let me just talk to her and DM her. And then you talk about like your work, and that's originally how I'm able to get like collectors to buy my work. If you just organically be yourself, authentically be yourself, don't try to fit into the world. I feel like people that are different and unique and just authentically yourself, you're just you, and people will organically just come to you because they like who you are, and your art will just be a second bonus. And then they'll just like want to collect your work, and that one collector that collects your work probably is gonna tell his friends like, "Oh, I just met this artist named Chaz or CD or HardArt or whatever your name is." And they're like, "I really like their art. I just bought a piece. I feel like you should buy one because you always like this types of art too." So it's really just about word of mouth anywhere you go. In real life, in Web3, family, friends, strangers, you just never know. So you know, that's why I always say be kind, because you never know what anyone's going through. If you're kind, if you're genuine, and if you, the right people will come along. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I definitely believe in also the attracting the right individuals. What you put out, you get back. And actually, I guess bringing it right back to Sam, one of the things I know he's known for is watching and observing from the outside and kind of seeing how people move. But also, you mentioned CD regarding interacting. I think, also one of the few that continues, especially when you have such a large following and people constantly tagging you and commenting. It's hard to keep up, obviously, to all of the notifications, but he's someone that has been pretty consistent with trying to respond to as many people as possible, and not only with a simple emoji, but I think in thoughtful kind of longer form responses as well. And so it goes back to what you just mentioned about being authentic and really putting out that type of energy. I think that's why the community continues to flock around him. I don't know if anyone else on stage has any comments regarding any of the kind of community building or marketing strategies or anything, I guess, initially their takes on the entire Masquerade. But
I'll just jump in briefly. And by the way, Muju, you're on stage with us, so chime in whenever you like. Don't have to necessarily raise your hand. But so, yeah, I would just mention.
Yeah, thanks.
Hey, hey. Yeah, just briefly before Muju jumps in, if he wants, I would just say I think you're right on the money that the collectors in this primarily are invested in emotionally. And I think the secondary market for a collection like Player would speak to that because yes, they change hands, but for the most part, if you were involved, if you wrote an observation and contributed to the game last year, the Monument game, then you knew there was more coming this year for the Masquerade and you wanted to be involved. Even though that wasn't announced last year, Sam has had a good history of releasing things. He's been releasing new collections on a regular basis and again, kind of outperforming the last one each time. So you could safely assume in that cult-like behavior that Sam and the team were going to produce another hit. And so far, that seems to be the case. Time will tell, but it's got everybody's excitement right now. And lastly, I would just say like energy is the big thing that even Sam himself has said that's attracting him to all this, whether that's collaborative energy, whether it's participating and extending your energy to the game, and sometimes monetary even. He recognizes that's part of this. It's not cheap to get involved. It's $7,000, but even money he calls as a form of energy that's collectively agreed upon to get things done and to build this community and to build engagement. So, and obviously to pay the team members like Chrisley that he needs around him in order to build such a big production. So, yeah, I think it's really interesting to look at the dynamics, especially Vasia, like you mentioned, versus a PFP. The trading on these collections is not nearly as heavy because there's a profit motive, yes, for some traders, but primarily people are getting involved for emotional involvement. And Muju, I didn't mean to cut you off if you were trying to jump in earlier. Vasia, I couldn't just hear you now, but Feel free to chime in, and Muju, I'd love to hear your
Yeah,
remarks on it too.
thanks. I didn't want to interrupt anything because I thought it was really interesting, the topics you were talking about. And I wanted to say something about Sam as well, because I have known about his art before he entered the Web3 space. And I have known about his work because of Logic, because I'm a huge Logic fan. And I also started making art during my architecture studies, and my first commissions were album covers. And one big driver for me and many artists as well to make art is music. So I associate visual art with music, or I get heavily inspired by music. And so I also started. Well, also no, I started making album cover art, and then I saw. I always look at the cover art in music, and I saw Logic's album cover, and the drawing style is absolutely crazy. So if you look at Sam's work, his brush strokes, and I think I'm not sure, so maybe you know about it. He uses a software that simulates paint, as far as I know. So like, interrupt me when I'm wrong. And he doesn't use like layers like many digital artists do. You work with layers. It's a super convenient, like comparing to traditional physical art. And Sam, I think he doesn't do that, and he really draws in and paints in traditional ways. And he has this texture on his paintings that you could really zoom in infinitely. Like, I think I think, if you didn't have pixels, like, and his work is super high res, you can zoom in super closely and like capture a tiny piece, and that could be an artwork itself. And I think this is something that like takes years of practice and mastery to achieve. And also, like, he entered the space with like this bigger idea that art is something bigger. And I think when people call it like a cult, I think it's kind of wrong to say, because when you build a brand, like, also, like, especially in crypto, you have groups forming, you have trends forming. And if you collect a brand or an artwork, you kind of connect with like-minded people that also like that style. And that spans like beyond art. That could be like a brand like Pokemon, for example. Like, people are excited to be part of this bigger story, and it's mostly like about the card art, you know? And this excitement is also something, like, also for like this success that Sam Spratt has. It's amazing also for many other artists to see, because he is basically like, he is living the dream. He gets to dedicate, like, he gets to disappear for an entire year or for months, and just sit in the dark room and just do the painting. That's like Michelangelo, what he did with a statue of David. He just, for 3 years, he was like in a dark chamber, like crafting that piece. And that is what an artist truly wants to do. They don't want to get out there and spend hours, days, every week to market and be on social media and have to keep up with trends. Like, an artist wants to work with someone who does that work, does that management, and he gets to do that, and he does it brilliantly. And people, get excited to be part of his world. And I work at so I do art as a side hustle, like many in the space, and I work at a high-end architecture firm. And we have like months and months of waiting lists. And my boss today told me, like, yesterday I had my first client acquisition meeting. And what my boss then told me today as an advice, he was like, people need to come and want to work with you. Like, they need to be excited to get to work with you. And in many cases, like, if you want to like have commercial success, sell something, get a commission, it's often the way where you're lucky to be working. Like, people just come to you and they just want this work to be done, and it's often very frustrating, and it's like, that's like the struggle. to get to do art full time as a business. Uh, and Sam creates this thing where you want to be part of it. You want to like you get excited to be part of the story, and that's what, like, if I want to like collect something, I get to be part of the story. This is absolutely amazing. And this was done with the monument game, where collectors and fans could actually now be part of the entire lore of the entire story. And this is something where many other artists, I hope, including myself, will take inspiration to make an entire story and like create an entire world. And yeah, I think that's just amazing. And I'm super excited to see like more of his work. Like this piece, like when I saw it, oh my God, it's the Masquerade piece is like, it's probably the best like work, like the highest quality of work I have seen. Uh, Also like technique wise. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. There were so many great things that you mentioned. I guess the first thing I want to touch upon is you use the word inspire, and I think Sam is continuing to just inspire people, whether it's where they can go from working and doing album covers to creating art for yourself, and the levels in which you can take that to the different approaches from instead of constantly trying to push out work to pulling back and spending a few years or however long underground in a way just to focus on your bigger masterpiece, if you will. And I actually really love the line you mentioned, people want to work with you. And it's so funny, I was listening to something earlier today, and it was a podcast, and the girl was basically saying, like, you don't want to be the vitamin for people, you want to be the painkiller. Like, people forget their vitamins because vitamins are, it's the extra. It's like, yeah, I should take my vitamins. It'll make me feel better and healthier and whatever. But a painkiller, you don't forget to take your painkiller. Like, you have a headache, you want it. You're going to go chasing and looking for it. And if you're able to create that want from people, I definitely agree. It's a different, level of demand in a way. And I know you mentioned you weren't a huge fan of the word cult, but I used it and I mean it in a very positive way when I describe a community like Sam's, any kind of cult-like approach. It's, again, super fans, and they're the fans that they don't care about they're not even talking floor prices. They're talking about it because they just love it. They're emotionally invested, and the lore of it, and being able to release it in the way that Sam is doing right now, and like by the invitation only, to have access. It's a very interesting, I think, mechanic he's implementing to kind of control it, and to also give control to the community and allow them to make the decision as to who they want. And it's a very interesting kind of gamified mechanic that we haven't really been seeing. And it doesn't matter. It's not about who's spending the most. It's about who's, meant to kind of be in the community. And it's a very interesting, I think, way to, again, kind of curate it. Milton, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add on to the conversation, but we are kind of approaching the hour. We did touch upon the majority of the components that we were going to run through. So was there anything else that maybe you wanted to add on before we kind of bring it to the key takeaways we usually wrap it up with?
No, you can jump in there. We can go to the takeaways. I think Muju had excellent points about the want, the desire. I think maybe my only point that I was going to bring up, if now that we have a couple of people on stage who are artists, Muju and Chaz, for example, you just mentioned it, Muju. You said, like, this is the penultimate what an artist wants to do. They want to be David in a dark chamber for 3 years creating their masterpiece. They want to be Sam Spratt, who's been working for 17 months apparently on this collection. I know this is a side hustle for many, a hobby for some even, but I think eventually an artist would love the luxury of being able to build a world, but obviously it takes time. And as Chrisley mentioned, it takes a pretty big team. Well, if an artist were looking out and wanting to aspire to do something along these lines of building their own world, I'm just curious if artists feel like they know where to go. Because I thought it was pretty humbling what Sam said in the beginning. He's like, I just called up the Nifty Gateway team. He's like, literally, I had no clue if this could even work. I just spit out a bunch of verbal diarrhea to them, and they were kind enough to hear me out. And what started it off as a very, very rough draft mess we slowly built upon and we revised. And Chris Lee said she said no multiple times to ideas, but eventually it comes to a head and you have this beautiful project that you've created. I'm just curious if artists feel like they have access to the tools or know where they would start. Like, I think that looks really daunting from the outside to see 17 months of work go into a project and be like, damn, where did he start that process? Muju, Chaz, feel free to chime in on this. Would you know where to start if you were looking at world building for yourself?
Yeah. So I think this is a really important point. And I think whatever work you do as an artist, as soon as it goes beyond like selling prints from home and like actually like going and having an exhibit at a gallery, you work with other people, and you will not work alone, and you will also not make it if you work alone. And it's impossible to work alone. It's all about going out there and I would say networking, but it's also a word I don't really like. So you meet people and you network and you find uh, actually places where you want to work with like one day. And some places, you know, if you can't just start out as an artist and go to Christie's and be like, please, like I want to have an auction. So it takes years of work, and it also takes like this factor of, you know, showing that you have some value, and it also aligns with people being excited to come work with you. And you do not have to have 10 years of experience and like have to have a massive portfolio to have people come and be excited to work with you and do something. So I I think how it's done, like I have done a project. I've worked when I finished my studies. I worked for 8 months full time on this project, and I found people that knew my work, that liked my work, and wanted to work with me. Came to me to ask about it. And when I had the idea, they said, "Hey, why don't you do it with us?" Oh, hey, we can do that. We can build this website. We can build this mechanic, and you go and do it. And it takes, you know, if you're starting out, it takes trial and error. Some things do not work out. It takes, you know, mistakes that you need to do and go through and experience to learn from them and like a pivot. And it just yeah, takes mostly patience, but it's possible. And I have had the luck to work with people like Transient, to work with Ninfa, the gallery Ninfa, or like even the process of getting onboarded on Super Rare. Like I had to work for it. I had to like prove that, you know, like my work has value and it's selling, and you know there's a win-win for like the entire team. Like you can't just show up at places and just look to profit and get opportunities. You have to bring the opportunities, and you go from there. Yeah, I want to hear Chaz.
So yeah, like my take on that, like I got lucky. I got really lucky with Super Rare because I got it onboarded through Neil Gallery like a year and a half ago, and I had one piece of photography out there forever, and it didn't even sell. But like somehow, I guess all the people that went through those kind of open calls like a year and a half ago, where you're doing the whole open call season, they just onboarded all those artists and became creators over there without even announcing it. Like you had to kind of like just go see if you could mint or not. And when I figured out that I could, I started being really picky about what I'm putting over there. And I've had a little bit of stuff. I sold my first one. I'm on my second one, you know. And I'm like, but it's like what I was talking about earlier about sticking with one certain like theme or aesthetic on each different platform. That way I can be different kinds of creative on different platforms, but instead of being all over the map and like every platform, I'm sticking with one style, one thing. And as for the tools, um I've been building something new for like the last 3 months. So I had like 3 surgeries, got a fourth one coming up this next week. And like this entire time I've been recovering, I've been able to be in front of the computer like a couple of times a day for a couple hours, and like which is used way cut down. And I've had to rediscover a bunch because I want my goal this year is to get my video art with DJs inside this Vegas sphere. That was my goal on New Year's Eve. I said, that's my record. That's going to be my New Year's Eve resolution. It's the only one I'm gonna make. It's like by the end of 2025, art's going to be in the sphere. And I had no idea like going into that, like, how am I going to make that happen? Like, how do I even get in touch with people like Anime or people that do visuals over there? Like, I don't even know any in Vegas. And I had to start setting out this last few months, like, what do I start to do? And what kind of tools do I need to build this kind of art? Like, I have an aesthetic, have like a theme, have like a vision in my mind, but how do I make it happen? So I've had to kind of lean into like learning and I'm using like a multitude of different kind of tools as I discover them, as things evolve with tools. And I started putting out teasers of that stuff, and I had someone from a platform approach me, and they were like, I love your work, and I want to put it on a techno festival that's going to end up in the sphere later on this year. And here it is, like, not even 2 months into the year, I manifested it. I made it out, like,
Whoa, Chaz, congrats. That's amazing.
Yeah. Like, I mean, and it's the guys from Black Dove, like, they came to me and they said, hey, like, they worked with me last year with a bunch of during the Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas season, we did a bunch of art for them. And like, I'm a one-person army. Like, I'm not literally one hand, one arm, like, army, like, because I only have my left hand that works. I always make a joke about that because I had brain surgery like 17 years ago, and I literally create everything left-handed, even though I'm not left-handed at all. So for me to get this kind of break and like figure out how to do this, like, that was a big key element, was like paying attention, like, what's happening in that community, like, what kind of tools are these people using, and doing a deep dive and like figuring out like how can I make this happen, and just started putting the work out there, and like, boom, now it's happening this year. I'm like, this is crazy. I'm actually, as we speak right now, I'm working on a brand new piece in DaVinci, like, because it's like the best high res tools that you can use for video. It's like, is the DaVinci Resolve. So, and I love the way that there's so many different aspects of different tools you can use, like, to create stuff in there. And it's just so many, like, it's mind-boggling the way you can do with that program, and it's free.
Congrats, Chaz. Not to cut you off, but congratulations on the sphere. And I think I want to bring to light, like, the importance, I guess, of taking the time and really breaking down your goal. It sounded like you identified kind of like what you needed to do as well in terms of, actionable steps, and I'm glad it came to you so quickly. But you also touched upon earlier as well regarding the branding, and bringing it back to Milton's question regarding, it's a very daunting thing to see what Sam has produced at the end, but how do you as an artist potentially begin to create something similar for yourself? And I think the personal brand is important in the sense of like setting yourself apart. And what Sam has created is something very personal. It's a very personal story to him. And, for those that maybe aren't familiar, not only is there, even at the very end of the teaser that's pinned up top, it's his daughter's heartbeat and, sonogram. And it's very much of that personal narrative, but also regarding his struggle of going from an artist that was creating artwork for other artists to being able to create artwork for himself and kind of take that different direction in his creative career. Basically what I'm trying to say is all of this artwork is a reflection of his personal story. It's very authentic to himself. And I think any artist that is trying to build something in general, let alone something to this scale, it comes right back to how do you set yourself apart? And that's just being authentic to yourself. And each of us have a very unique lens and individual story to tell. And I think that's just very, an important message that he's putting out, and something that we can all take as inspirational. Like, if Sam did it, so can everyone else to an extent. It's just, being able to acknowledge that a lot goes into it. And, it's not an easy task, but it's definitely achievable. So I just wanted to build upon what you were saying there. And I guess to close this out with our usual kind of key takeaways, I think it's important that all of us celebrate and support, even though we're not all actively, quote unquote, participating in the masquerade, myself included. We're watching from the sidelines, and that's okay. I think we still all play a role, and the community responding on Twitter and the momentum that it continues to build, whether you're invested in it or not. I think it's just important to celebrate and also to just take notes. Like we mentioned, from different angles, how inspirational Sam is for many of us. Whether you're an artist or not, there's things that I've learned from what he's been doing, especially regarding community and marketing and all of this. So it's important to just, take the time to slow it down, break it down, try to digest it, pick out the things that you like, and then you could perhaps apply to yourself. I think it's just fostering this community of learning from each other as well. And Web3 is such a new industry. We're the Wild West, as many people reference it. So it's good to learn from each other. I don't think it's, copying and this and that. I think, again, we all have a very authentic and unique lens that we bring to the table. So being able to see what resonates with you and then apply it to your own practice, I think could be extremely beneficial in this learning environment, essentially. So those are my key takeaways. Milton, I don't know if you have anything else that you maybe want to add before we close it out.
No, I thought that our guests had great points, and I like where Muju's coming in and just letting you know that if you have your idea in mind about world building, you got to start somewhere. Chaz had the same idea. Make it very clear, make it defined, and then I think you'll find as you look around, you actually have a lot of resources at your fingertips. You find that Web3 people are pretty generous with their time, and we got a sharp community around us. So I think this is just a great inspiration for other artists. I would love to see more world building done. Obviously, gets a lot of attention, and I'm excited to see where the masquerade goes from here.
Same. I'm very excited to see how it continues to develop. And I just want to say very quickly, guys, thank you for joining. This was definitely one of our shorter and smaller spaces, but Milton and I are here every single Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern. If you haven't already, I've pinned it up top. We have a newsletter you could register for. We send out weekly updates regarding the podcast, as well as what the agency is working on behind the scenes. So would super appreciate some registering for that, and make sure to subscribe and follow us. All these conversations are recorded and streamed to all the major platforms. If these spaces have any value, feel free to support us by following and rating Moments, the podcast. And we'll be back again next week. So Milton, if you want to DJ us out, thank you again for everyone that tuned in and for joining the stage. I super appreciate the contributions and excited for next week's conversation as well. Thanks for tuning in to Moments, the podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe and follow us to keep up with all the latest trending Web3 topics. Join us every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern on X for our live space and be a part of the dialogue.